Hello, everyone. I wanted to break up chapter 10 into some segments so that you don't get one long video again. Um, for the first part, we are going to talk about what predicts attraction, which is a really fun section to me. The whole chapter is focusing on attraction, relationships, friendship. Um, is included in the chapter as well in terms of close relationships, how we meet people, why we like who we like, um, and all that kind of fun stuff. So, yeah. Um, it's divided up into four sections. One is on what predicts attraction. This section focuses on actual physical attraction, romantic attraction, but also friendships and why we tend to be drawn to certain types of people. The second section is really short, and that's basically online dating, basically. How do we meet people? And it talks about old school versus new school in terms of trying to meet people through social connections, not necessarily social media, but a friend of a friend type thing versus online. Um, then there's a section on love and close relationships, and what is love? What happens to you when you're in love? It talks about attachment styles as well. Um, so we'll get to that in a little bit. And then the last section is on what makes a happy relationship happy versus who breaks up, and can you predict that? And then who is worse off after a breakup versus who is better off after a breakup. So, anyhow, it's everything from meeting people until breaking up with people, basically, in this chapter. So, let's get started with section one on attraction. If we were in person, I would ask you right now to think about what makes someone attractive to you in terms of dating. And then I would also ask you what makes a good friend. And we'd list them on the whiteboard and all that kind of stuff. But since we're not in person and I don't want to make you guys do lots of discussion sections where you don't come to a conclusion, we're just gonna go with the a lecture. So here we go. I'm going to share with you some slides, just again, so you're not looking at me the whole time. Um, so what predicts attraction? That is the question. And a lot of people are kind of surprised by the answer to this in terms of what's supported with research. So the first thing that actually pops up in this section is just being around people, literally physical proximity to them, seeing them on an everyday basis, interacting with people more. The more you get to know someone, usually the more you like them, unless you really didn't like them to begin with, and then you hate them. But yeah, so the propinquity effect, big word there, propinquity. It basically just means closeness, physical closeness. The more we see and interact with people, the more likely they are to become our friends. Um, Close friendships and dating relationships are often started in high school, maybe middle school. You get them all over the range, but a lot of good close friendships start in college, in part because you're living in the dorms and are forced to be around these people all the time in class, as well as at home, which is the dorm for y'all, or an apartment. But yeah, classic study actually looked at who you tend to make friends with. at school. And basically, they found that where you live in a dorm makes a difference as to how many friendships you have. People who live by the entrance to a dorm near a busy stairwell, where two hallways cross, those people tend to have more friendships in general. And you tend to become good friends with people who are basically your next door neighbors as well. So whoever you're around tend to become your friends. I just lost you guys in Zoom. I don't know why. It just said that Zoom was having to restart. So, anyhow, this is where we were, uh, although it's not sharing with you anymore. So, let me reshare that with you. That was not what I was sharing. Where did it go? I'll be honest, I don't know what it's doing right this second. So, I'm going to pause for just a second and I'll be right back. Got it, finally. So, when we were so rudely interrupted, thank you, Zoom. Um, yeah, I'm recording on Zoom. We were talking about the propinquity effect and how basically you make friends by who you're around, unless you really hated them to begin with. In terms of dorms, 41% of people became friends with their next door neighbors in college. And then if you lived on the opposite end of a hallway, you were not as likely to become friends with them in a dorm. And like I said, where you lived in the dorm kind of also determined how many friends you made, um, because you were exposed to more people on a regular basis if you live right near the entrance or near a busy intersection. Um, yes, and that refers to functional difference, in terms of where you live. Okay. Um, what causes people to like people who they see more often? I don't know. The biggest theory in this area, though, is the mere exposure effect. And y'all, the mere exposure effect is true. We don't know why, but the more exposure we have to people, the more we see them, the more we tend to like them. They're more familiar, more comfortable, and you gradually tend to like them more. Um, don't know. We like what is familiar. There were several studies done on the mirror exposure effect over the years to kind of prove this. Um, this is true. One is not in the book, but I love it. They had a student come to a big lecture class, who was not in the lecture class. So, a graduate student, a Confederate who was in on the study, come to a big lecture class either once during the semester, four times during the semester, or like once a week during the semester. And at the end of the class, they had everyone rate random people's attractiveness, and they stuck that graduate student's picture in there. And the more she had been to that class, the more attractive people tended to rate her. So, anyhow, that was a fun little study. All right, so let's move on from the propinquity effect and mere exposure. By the way, the guy who came up with mere exposure, Zients, is the same guy who did the cockroach study. He's a pretty interesting person. So, another thing that makes people attractive to us is similarity. It can literally be that you look kind of similar to someone, but it tends to be more personality based. So let's talk about this for a second. It's like, do opposites attract? And is that a good thing? Is it good to have complementary personalities where one person may be more outgoing, the other one is a little bit more introverted, and they balance each other out? Research shows that similarity wins. So while opposites may attract short term, they do not make for good relationships. And um, the complementary thing is with the E in it is true for small differences, but not for big ones. So if you have one person who's really outgoing, they're constantly wanting to go out into the world and see people and be social, that butterfly thing. Whereas the person who's more introverted would prefer to Netflix and chill. So no matter what you do, you've got someone who's kind of unhappy. You either stay in too much for one person or go out too much for the other person. And over time, that causes problems, and people tend to break up over any kind of big difference between them. So let's talk about some things in similarity that matter. Um, demographics, attitudes, values, yes. So we tend to be drawn to people who are similar to us in terms of like even socioeconomic background, what type of culture we're from. We tend to like people who are from the same general area of the country, people who have similar attitudes, political or otherwise, movie preferences, um, similar interests, and values in terms of what's most important, making money, family, um, working out all the time, being lazy, work-life balance. Yeah, what's really important to you? What do you want to do and place the most emphasis on in terms of time and effort, kind of thing? Interests and experiences as well. Um, it's hard if one person is really into something, the other one isn't. If it's just one or two things, it's no big deal because if someone really likes to LARP, live action role play, go in the woods and have sword fights and stuff, every now and then that's okay. But if the other person truly hates it, uh, but they have interests to balance it out, it's okay, unless they're in the woods all the time playing swords. So, anyhow, you want people with some similar interests so that you're not spending all of your time apart. Um, yeah. Um, it's also something to base a friendship on, of we just like it when you can talk about interests with someone else. Um, they talk about close friendships are often made in school. They've already mentioned that about college because of prolonged propinquity of getting to know someone over time. It's part of the reason why it's so hard to make friends as an adult, in that you just aren't around someone that much as often. You might um, find some folks at work, but it's a little bit different environment where you're not necessarily in the same boat from a young age. Um, okay, yes. Similarity in appearance, even. Um, I'm just going to say this and you figure out how harsh it is, but like more attractive people tend to be attracted to more attractive people. And people who are less attractive, while they may think that the attractive person is attractive, they tend to wind up dating someone who is similar in attractiveness levels. So they are attracted to someone who kind of matches them, who's not out of their league or totally not, in terms of the other perspective. So like a seven usually dates a seven or a six or an eight, in terms of attractiveness. We also tend to like people who are similar in height, coloring, hair color, eye color, although the little things don't matter as much. And this creeps me out every time they mention it, but even similarity in genetics. So again, if you're similar in genetics, you're probably going to look alike. And they found that even with friendships, you tend to find some DNA in common that you didn't know was there. Um, and the explanations for this are just kind of wild, but it's hilarious. But yeah, they found that the average friend shares enough genetic, not generic, similarity as two people who shared a great 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 grandparent. So, yeah, we don't know how that happens, but it does. Brings a whole new like light to like people in Alabama and whatever. Okay, and I can make fun of that because I'm from Georgia and spent a lot of time in Alabama. So, all right, similarity in committed relationships versus flings. Similarity is way more important in committed relationships versus fling. The one night stand doesn't matter. Go ahead and pick that opposite that attracts you. But again, for committed relationships, similarity works. Another thing we truly like in a potential partner, whether that be romantic or friendship, is that they like us. And in fact, there was a study done. I made some notes somewhere on this. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So basically, for this study, it was guys who were the subjects or participants, and they thought they were meeting a girl for the first time over the phone, old school, talking on the phone. It was done in the 70s, I think. And they just showed him a picture of the girl they were talking to. And uh, no, wait. Yes. Um, and basically, they said that at some point they would show him a picture of what a girl looks like and said, "This girl likes you." She said she had a crush on you when she saw your picture. And those people, the fake people in the pictures, were liked more when they had a crush on the subject. So basically, knowing that someone likes you, you tend to like them more, regardless of exactly like if they're the hottest person in the pile. Um, Reciprocal liking can overcome attractive faces and being kind of different from people in attitudes. When you really are liked by someone else, at least initially, it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, they like me here. Playing hard to get doesn't really work. And they don't really give you a whole bunch of details, but basically, like, we want people to like us. And if you act like you don't like them, that can be a not good thing in terms of developing a relationship. Okay, so the big topic on physical attractiveness. Um, yeah, so in terms of romantic relationships and even to a certain extent in friendships, physical attractiveness is kind of important. It's very important in initial liking and romantic relationships. Um, they say there are no major gender differences on how much people pay attention to physical attractiveness. I don't know if you've heard the stereotype that it's more important for men to have an attractive partner than for women. And that's true when you're looking at what people say is important to them. When you look at who people actually choose, it's very important for women as well. They tend to choose someone who's more attractive just as much as men do, but women don't talk it up as much. Yeah, so men are more likely to report that attraction is important. Where'd that go? Um, yeah, we tend to pay more attention to attractive people. So what makes someone attractive? They go into some details in here, but honestly, it's partly personality and physical attractiveness, and what exactly is physically attractive changes based on culture, and time. So, what was attractive in like the 1480s in Venice was some fat women. What's attractive today in the United States tends to be thin women and kind of who are healthy looking, though, and guys who have a little meat on their bones in terms of muscly. Um, but here are some things that specific traits that are important in men rating women. Large eyes, small nose, small chin, prominent cheekbones, high eyebrows, big smile. Um, and then in terms of what women think is attractive in men, again, eyes and cheekbones pop up in the big smile, but having a larger, more square jaw. Um, so there's similarities in some sense between what is attractive in a woman versus what's attractive in a man. Um, it's really hard to narrow down what is attractive, specifically for everybody, especially when you get into bodies and not just faces. However, facial attractiveness, there are some things in common. One is symmetry. So if you were to divide your face in half and compare the right half to the left half of faces, we're not perfectly symmetrical. Um, one eye might be a little bit higher than the other, one nostril flares a little more, or slightly lopsided grin when you smile. The more symmetry there is, the more attractive people usually are perceived. Why? Don't know. But there's a theory that having highly symmetrical features means that you have good genes and that you're less prone to diseases and things like that. And there are some reasons why that might be true. Um, but there are some reasons why that might not be true as well. But symmetry is important. If you ever want to like compliment someone, say, you're really symmetrical. Average composite faces are also more attractive. Um, I kind of don't like talking about this one as much because there's a problem with this research. The average looking person is usually created for this study by blending faces. So for this one, I think there's a little bit more info. You can blend like two people, four people, 16, 32 people into one picture. And no, they don't tell you how many are averaged into these, but this could be the original person. And then you took this person along with three other people and averaged their looks in the computer to come up with this. And then maybe, let's say, 32 for this person. The more you average, usually the more attractive someone becomes. And it's partially an artifact of the software. It creates softer, it's almost like you put them in a filter on Instagram, softer features. But also the theory is that average people look more familiar. And so you get kind of a mere exposure effect out of it. And so you like them because they seem familiar. Um, yeah. We also tend to like people who look like us because we're familiar to ourselves, thanks to mirrors. And so we tend to like that as well. So they kind of sum it up in terms of propinquity, similarity, reciprocal liking. All of that kind of leads into some familiarity. I think the last topic um, in that little subsection about what's attractive is assumptions we make about people. So there's something called the halo effect. I'm just going to go ahead and get to the bottom of this. The halo effect is a cognitive bias that we have to Give positive stereotypes to people who look good, basically. So if someone is attractive, we tend to think they have other positive personality characteristics, like they're socially skilled, they're smarter, that kind of thing. It's also known as what is beautiful is good. And in America and in the Western world, these things tend to go together. So beautiful people are thought to be more sociable, skilled in terms of interacting with people, extroverted, assertive, sexual, and popular. Um, but even like we tend to see them as being just better people, which is kind of messed up. You also tend to see that like the bad guy in cartoons, especially, but even in Bond films, the bad guy is really ugly and the good guy is pretty handsome. So they go through some examples of that. Um, there's actually a chart in your book on page 269 that summarizes the intercultural research, cross-cultural research. Basically, attractiveness is comes with a halo effect, or what's beautiful is good. In most cultures, it's just exactly what is attractive changes from culture to culture, and what's the details are of that stereotype change from culture to culture. So, in a big study where we were looking at Koreans, Americans, and Canadians, um, these were the traits that everyone had in common in terms of attractive people tend to be more social, extroverted, warm, responsive, friendly. And American cultures, we also put our independent twist on it if they're more strong, assertive, and dominant. But in Korean culture, you get more of that collectivistic twist to it. They're more sensitive, empathetic, trustworthy, generous, things that would be good in a culture that values relationships and harmony. So, yeah, there you go. Um, there's even a self-fulfilling prophecy of if someone treats you as if you are really attractive, you tend to have the personality characteristics assigned to the beautiful as good stereotype. So if people um, are treated as if they are good looking, they tend to become more confident and assertive, and they're more willing to come out of their shell and be more extroverted, basically. And they talk about a study that was done where, again, you were talking to someone, but you had a picture that didn't necessarily match the person you were talking to. And if someone who was not as attractive was assigned a picture of an attractive person, so that person was thinking they were talking to an attractive person, they're friendlier to begin with, and that person responded to that. And so you got people who were friendlier, more extroverted, because they were being treated as if they were a more attractive person, basically. Okay, so shifting gears. This is the last section in the first part of the chapter. They talk about evolutionary psychology. And this gets some flack for a couple different reasons, but there seems to be some truth behind it. With evolutionary psychology, the goal when it comes to mating, finding a partner, is all about passing on your genes. And just so you know, um, guys, there's a term called fecundity. Um, Fecundity, Fecundity, and that's the potential number of offspring you can have in a lifetime. And guys have a higher level of fecundity. They can have like hundreds, if not thousands, of offspring, whereas a woman, you can only have one every 9 months and only from like ages 12 to 50. So if our goal is to have our genes live on, to the next generation, it would be a good idea for women to invest more effort into each precious darling of an offspring and make sure they make it to adulthood. Whereas guys, it may be the best approach to go forth and spread your genetic material and see what sticks. Um, so that has some implications potentially for how men and women may approach relationships. Um, mhm. So women may be more attracted to men who have children already and have showed interest in those children so they can help her raise her precious babies. And they have greater material resources. In other words, they have some cash. Um, Whereas men are more attracted to attractive women who are younger, who have symmetrical faces. There's even a zero point 0.7 hip to or waist to hip ratio that's ideal, just be birthing hips. But yes, according to this, attractiveness is more important to men than to women, but we've already seen that's not necessarily the case. Um, but yeah, this would explain why there's a tendency for women to emphasize income a bit more and for men to emphasize young beauty more. There's some evidence for it. Um, you can see that. It's not 100%, but women do tend to value ambition, industriousness, earning capacity more than men do. And men tend to at least talk about looks more. Both, though, want honest, good people when it comes to a long-term relationship. Um, the argument against this is that maybe we were taught these patterns in a nutshell. That we were raised in a way that boys were taught to emphasize prettiness and women were taught to look for earning potential, and that norm, social norm, has just kind of carried over. If that's the case, what we think has evolved is actually just taught. And there's some evidence that shows that the preferences that they were talking about with evolutionary theory have been changing some, especially in the 20th, 21st centuries. So that would kind of be some evidence against evolutionary psychology. I don't know, but it still hasn't changed that much. So I'm going to end the video here and stop sharing and then pause recording. I've got a couple of little videos that I'm going to throw up for you on Canvas talking about online dating and love and long relationships, and I'll come back to you in another video in a bit. Talk to you later. Bye for now.